Good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for being here at our Working Faith Breakfast Gathering. Our focus is on leadership for the next month, and we're going to kick it off with a talk by my uncle Chip Robertson, and I'm so excited he's here. The title is Faithful Leadership. I want to just quickly open us in prayer. Dear God, thank you so much for being the creator of the universe, which is vast and glorious, and also for caring for us each as individuals, so much so that you can count the hairs on our heads. Thank you for being with us this morning. May your Holy Spirit be present. May you guide us in this meeting as we go on about our days and our work. Help us to participate in building your kingdom. And may we continue to walk with Jesus in all that we do. Help us to do your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So my Uncle Chip has just flown in from Dallas. We're grateful to have him. Uncle Chip is a staff person at Highland Park United Methodist Church. And you can tune into his sermons. He preached this past Sunday at Highland Park. And he always challenges us to look at the gospel in a new light. And he's a practicing attorney. So he's walking the working faith life himself. And he's just a great uncle. He has 3 sisters. One of them is my mom. And they really do care about each other, and they love it. And he walks the talk, and I'm excited for you to hear his words. He's got 3 kids. My cousins, Kip, Matt, and Meredith, live in Kentucky, Kansas City area, and also in Dallas. He's also the former Supreme Court Chief Justice of Missouri, which is also pretty neat. So, but he has a legal mind, and I love the way he assesses Scripture and communicates it. And I hope you enjoy this talk. Welcome, Uncle Chip. Thank you.
Well, one of the great treats of my life is having Drew as a nephew and Kelly as a niece-in-law, I guess is how we'd say it. But and it's fun to be here. If you know Drew, you know that he's very well organized, and so he called me last week to come and do this. And so yesterday I was sort of half panicked about. So this is far less prepared than I usually like to be. And as a result of that, yes, sir. Oh boy, I hate doing this. We don't have okay, I'll just have to try and stand still, which is going to be hard. All right, so here we go. So this is a picture. It's going to drive the whole thing. Perhaps you can see what it is. You can see somebody lying down there and the breath of God coming into them, okay? It's an artist's rendition. No one was there. No one had even invented the camera yet. So there we go. So here's the first little bit of Genesis that this whole thing's going to drive off of. Then God said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground. So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. So it's a sentence that would be marked up badly by an English teacher. It just keeps repeating itself in different ways. It's Hebrew parallelism. But, oh my goodness. All right, I'll try. Will it come out of here? Very technical. All right, I'll try. All right, so here we go. So we're going to spend a little bit of time here at the beginning, and I'm probably have more than we're going to have time for. And I want you to feel free at any point that you disagree, have a question, I'm not clear, I'm talking too fast, I'm making you wake up. Whatever it might be, you feel you're part of this. So 2 words, image or likeness, right? So here's the Hebrew. I can't read it any better than you can. In fact, some of you can read it better than I can. But that word is tselem, and it means image. It's a masculine word. It's going to matter here in a second. It's not a picture of. It means a representation or reflection of God's attributes. It doesn't mean that we look like God. It means that we are built to act like God. So the word for likeness is this demuth, which is a feminine word. So what the Hebrew writer has done by using image and likeness is he's brought everything into it, male and female. You see that later on. And it means a resemblance or similar to. So you get these two things that you end up saying it doesn't mean we look like God. It means we are built to act like God. So then God says that you're going to rule over some things. You remember we went over this a minute ago. I'm not going to read it all to you, but rule over is really a critical part of this. That word in Hebrew is rada, which means to, we would think in English it means to control or force or subjugate. This is where we're going to get really into the idea of leadership later on in this, all right? So if you think your job as a leader is to rule over, and you use that word as we use it in English, you're going to have an entirely different view of it than I think the view that Genesis has, because what it means in Hebrew is to exercise loving stewardship over. Responsible you are, if you are ruling over, you're responsible for God's creation. You are to protect it and each other. You are to bring everything into a relationship together. This is going to be a big piece of this. We live in a transactional world. But this whole thing is setting up a relational world. And if you know the Hebrew or the Greek word agape, my favorite definition of that is an unconquerable desire to act for the good of another without expecting anything in return. This is the same word almost as rule over, if you think of it that way. To rule over is to act for another without expecting anything in return. So, you have to offer sacrificial love, and you represent the Creator, and therefore you are becoming, if you're ruling over, God's ambassador on earth to everything that's around and to each other. So these are the core concepts. We are given power, but it's limited power. It's power only to act as a person who is carrying God's purpose. Any other power is illegitimate power. So, I don't know what you read around. Jordan Peterson's got a new book out that talks about this a little bit. It's called We Who Wrestle with God. But this is essentially something I picked up from physics long, long ago when I was reading a book by Jamie Gleig called Chaos. And where in the world does creativity begin? It is in this place between chaos and order. And if you think about it in your life, that's true. If it's too chaotic, like my office, you can't find anything, you can't get anything done. If it's too ordered, you also can't get anything done. So what you have to do is find that place which is the most uncomfortable place to be creative. So that's where God operated. The creation was set up, it seems to me, to take chaos and move it not all the way to complete order, but to where it could continue to grow, which is part of what the rule over is, right? We now become part of the creation because we have been given this opportunity to rule over. And not only are we part of the creation, we are part of the Creator. That's the responsibility. But in order to live there, you have to be willing to go to a difficult spot. So this is the place where creativity can happen even in your lives. But it's the way God, I believe, set up the entirety of the place. We're going to get you out of the chaos, but not all the way to where there's a group of rules that you can live with and live under and never change. So here's maybe an example that's ridiculous, but if the speed limit is 35, is there ever a time under the law when you can exceed the speed limit? And the answer is yes, if there is some sort of an emergency, or if you're in a car that has a red or blue light on the top of it, right? Which means the donut place has got fresh donuts. All right. So strategy, even in business, and you're going to find, I'm going to quote a lot of stuff in here today that's not biblical. There's going to be an atheist quoted in here. But I have this firm belief, and I hope you have it too, that there is nothing that you can learn that's true that's not going to point you to God. It doesn't matter who says it. So, strategy is almost always emerging from a combination of the deliberate and the unanticipated. Another way to look at the tension between chaos and order. You have the deliberate and you have the unanticipated. Now, this is a video, and I hope this is how you work it. All right, 4 tires, 2.9 seconds. Okay? Where's the leader in this team? Where's the leader? What's that? Nope. But it's a good try. The leader is the subject of all, the driver is the subject of all this. Does the leader have to be working on this? No, right? The leader could be somebody over there who's watching it. They practice this over and over. He's a coach. These are all the players. The leader of this team does not have to be involved in it. So here's a couple of books we're going to talk about. And they're going to set up 2 different kinds of environments. This, what you just saw in this Ferrari thing, is a kind environment, kind learning environment. This is where Malcolm Gladwell, who interestingly was at our church not too long ago, and I got to spend a bunch of time talking to him, and it was just fabulously fun. Most curious guy I've ever seen in my life. But at any rate, he said if you practice anything for 10,000 hours, you're going to become very, very good at it. Epstein comes along and says, well, that's great if it's in a kind learning environment. When Tiger Woods hits a golf ball for 10,000 hours, that ball's not moving. That's a kind learning environment. It's not reacting. So Stanley McChrystal, who was in charge of all the stuff in Afghanistan, where you have a command and control structure that the Army had put together, and you have a group of people who have no plan and are just connecting by cell phones and operating with one another on a daily basis with no known plan, that's in a different thing. So McChrystal says that this is a complicated environment. The Ferrari example is complicated, okay? We're going to talk about how that changes. But so the environment is a predictable feedback environment. If you hit the golf ball and you hit it wrong, it'll do the same thing each time if you hit it wrong each time the same way. So what's the structure you want to build if you're in a leadership position in a kind environment, okay? It's a command and control structure. McChrystal would say the same thing. So where would you apply this, okay? Where you want efficiency and procedure. And they both say that. Now, what's that like? Well, if you're running Southwest Airlines, the mechanics cannot depart from the rules. The FAA won't let them. That is a complicated environment, but you can handle it with procedures and efficiency. You're fixing the engines. So this is the kind of structure you'd want to have for that. Top down, just like you've always seen. It's a very transactional structure. Each person reports to a particular person, and you don't have to move outside of that. So here's another little video. Have you seen this before, some of you? This isn't going to go on too much longer, but isn't it amazing, these shapes that are getting put together? This goes on, by the way, for 45 minutes, not today. All right, that's the question. Where's the leader in that one? Well, the leader is in the middle of that one. The leader has to be in the middle of that one. They have taken that whole thing apart with computers. There's 300,000 birds there. And there is a big leader, and 7 birds drive off of that one bird. And then each one of those 7 birds becomes a leader to 7 other birds. And each one of those becomes a leader to 7 other birds, all the way down so that they can move synchronously. You're looking only at the bird you're looking at, but the whole thing is working together in this very, what Epstein would call a wicked learning environment, where you have this situation where everything is constantly moving and you cannot figure out what's going on. Now, why are these birds doing it? Any idea? There's a hawk, and this whole thing is designed for them to figure out a way to confuse the hawk. The hawk can't find a bird to attack. So over time, this is developed. This is this wicked environment where death is on the line, and they have the whole group get together in a way to avoid the problem of the hawk. So the environment here is wicked, and the causes are too varied to predict, which is what McChrystal learned when he was in Afghanistan. When the people there on the other side had no plan, and they would wake up every morning and cell phone each other and said, let's go this. There's no way to plan for that. You don't know where they're going. So McChrystal puts together a team of literally 3,000 people who are available to get on to a call as needed when they figure out what's going to happen that day. So the structure, well, you want distributed authority, like the birds. You want people who are going to be close to the need to move to make the judgment as the leader. And what's it best applied to? Where you have adaptability is part of your purpose. Now, this might be the structure you would start with in that. But this is the one you want to end with. Your organizational structure should have all of this stuff blending together when you're in the midst of this. This is, I think, exactly what God sets up in Genesis. All of these people are going to come along. They're not going to do predictable things. The whole thing has to work in a fluid way. If this were really the right picture, it would be moving. And this is the world we now live in, by the way. So, McChrystal in another book says, leading is more about being part of a feedback loop within a system than it is about being at the top of a command chain. Exactly what I think Genesis says. You're constantly getting information. What is my role as the image of God? How do I carry that out? Now, I don't like the word leader. I've never liked it. And the reason I don't like it is, what does a leader assume? They're in charge, right? Of what? They've got followers, and they're in charge of them. And if you set up what we historically have done, the leader is not only supposed to be in charge of them, he's to tell them what to do and to have the big ideas. You know, that we elect presidents. I'm not going to get into one way or another on that, because that's a tough subject these days. Depending on what side you're on, it doesn't matter. But, you know, we elect them to come up with these ideas and move forward with them. Wrong model. But we've done it for 200 and some years. This is what I like. A leader is a weaver. You take all of the strands that are the people and you put them together, and then the leader disappears into the fabric. Keep that as the metaphor. Now we're going to talk about how does a weaver operate. And these are the three things that I think anybody who is a weaver, if you want to use leader, go ahead. If you're going to be a Genesis leader, I think these are the three things you have to create: purpose, safety, and trust. And then the weaver operates at the intersection of all of those, making sure they continue to happen. So Dan Heath has just come out with a book that basically says about purpose. That's one of the first circle. Of all the things that can boost emotions, motivation, and perception during a workday, the single most important is making progress in meaningful work. This is a meta study that was done over hundreds of companies. When they said, how did you write down whether you had a good day or a bad day, and then what made the difference? And it was purpose. They knew the purpose, meaningful work. Clayton Christensen, who recently died, was a devout Mormon, wrote this terrific book. You can read as well as I can, but I'm going to do it just so we're all on the same page. There are only two ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it by creating incentives. In other words, if you pay people more money, will they work better and be happier? And all of the studies say short-term, yes, long-term, no. Or you can inspire it by creating motivation through meaning. Motivation through meaning is much less about external prodding or stimulation and much more about what's inside of you and inside your work. If you feel good about what you're doing, if you love what you're doing, if you are ruling in the Genesis way or being ruled in the Genesis way, you're going to have an altogether different view of things if you're going there just to get the paycheck. So you've all probably heard of Simon Sinek. He's everywhere these days. I actually got to spend some time with him too. He's not near as interesting as Malcolm Gladwell, but he's fun to be around. But very few people or companies can clearly articulate the why. That's the purpose, right? They can tell you what the what is, but why does your company exist? Why do you get out of bed every morning, and why should anyone care? Now we're driving at the purpose thing. If the answer to that is, I got to pay the rent, you get a different kind of worker than if I get to go and do something that's going to make a difference. So these are the Marcus Buckingham, who was the director of research for Gallup. It's interesting, I had to take a picture of this. Those are not my fingers, by the way. That's the actual cover of the book. But they now, if you try to buy this book, it says the Gallup organization. Marcus was taking too much credit, and so they redid the cover. But Marcus says he's got 12 questions in there, 400,000 workers they surveyed. And they basically came up with 12 questions, and if you answer these questions positively, you're going to have a great, great workforce. Do I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day? That's a purpose question. Do my opinions count? That's a purpose question. Does the why of my work match my idea of what is important? Do I have opportunities to learn and grow? None of us wants to be ignored. Everybody wants to try and reach our potential. Even the people you don't think do. That's what all the studies show. So, purpose has two components. Is it worthy investment of the time of my life? And second, can I see a way to accomplish it? This is a good plan, but I can't do it. This is a Houston story. President Kennedy came down here when they were getting ready to send his body to the moon, and he went down to the Johnson Space Center, and he ran into a janitor, and Kennedy was that kind of a guy. He went and introduced himself to the janitor, and he said to the janitor, "What do you do here?" And he says, "Well, I'm helping send a man to the moon." Right? Huge difference than I'm here to clean the floor after these sloppy engineers. So trust is maintained when values and beliefs are actively managed. We're going to go to trust in a second, but this requires constant clarification, discipline, and consistency. When these are absent, you don't have trust. It's communication. Okay? It's what you do when you bear the image of God. You don't make assumptions. You talk to people. Because you need to know what they're thinking, and they need to know what you're thinking. And when you do that, magic happens. So, George Schultz, who wrote this after he turned 100, and the last page of this says, "I don't know what I'm going to do in my next 100 years. Well, he's gone. But Here's what he says. Looking back, I'm struck that there is one lesson that I learned early and have relearned over and over for a century. Simply put, trust is the coin of the realm. When trust was in the room, whatever room that was, the family room, the school room, the coach's room, the office room, the government room, the military room, good things happened. When trust was not in the room, they didn't happen. Everything else is details, he says. So, if you want people to be trustworthy, then let them know that you trust them. The best leaders trust their followers with the truth, and do you know what happens then? They trust them back. And next, with that bond between them, they can do big, hard things together, and doing big, hard things together is how you change the world for the better. But it doesn't happen without that cement of trust. So we're now talking about trust. Trust has two elements: competence. I conclude that the people I'm working with are meaningfully participating, and character. They are people of integrity and vulnerability who are committed to the purpose too. And those people who you're asking that question of are asking it of you at the same time. Trust is the product of shared vulnerability. You know, if you will say something in any meeting which lets the people who you're working with know that you don't know the answer, then they have a participatory responsibility to come back to you. I was a governor's chief of staff for a while, and I realized that when I was running a meeting, people were not going to talk unless I had to give them permission to talk. And so I would pose the question that we were going to ask that day, and then I literally spent time before the meeting coming up with the dumbest solution I could think of, which for me was a lot easier than you might imagine. And so I'd said, I don't know what we ought to do here. What about this? Well, you could see from the looks on everybody's face that it was the dumbest thing they'd ever heard. But when the person who's supposed to be in charge says something really dumb, then that frees up the whole world to say something dumb. And they say things that they worry about being dumb that turn out to be the answer because they're not intimidated. It made every meeting go shorter, and it made every meeting go better. So, vulnerability proceeds from admissions of ignorance and a need for help. And we're going to be talking about safety here in a minute. And safety occurs when honesty is encouraged, not demeaned, when confessions of uncertainty are seen as the grease of progress. You've all been in a meeting with somebody who only has you there as sort of an actor in a play that they've already written, acted in, and won the Academy Award for, right? Nobody likes that. Because we're a whole lot smarter together than we are by ourselves. So here are the trust questions from Marcus Buckingham. Do I receive recognition for the work that I do? Has someone at work talked about my progress? Is there someone who encourages my development? All right, Annie Duke is a professional gambler, and she's quite good at it. She talks a lot about safety. What she does, she's got this incredible memory that allows her to remember each hand that's been played. And she has this group of people whose only job is to tell her what other choices she could have made when she placed the next round of bets and why this worked out or it didn't. They are helpful critics. But she says, I could only do that if I trusted them, if I was safe with them. So they sit around after every time and says it's almost impossible for us on our own to get the diversity of viewpoint provided by the combined personal breadth of a well-informed decision pod. That's what she calls it. To get a more objective view of the world, we need an environment that exposes us to alternative hypotheses and different perspectives. She won lots and lots, and now she does this kind of thing. She's written several books that they're quite good. One of them is called Quit. How do you know when to quit? How do you know when to fold during when you're playing poker? So at any rate, now this woman is named Jill Bolte Taylor. This is jumping around a little bit without the normal sort of segues, and I've got to hurry like mad. Well, we'll just stop when it's over. We're going to leave 10 minutes for you to ask questions or leave, whichever you prefer. And by the way, if leave is the option you want, you can employ it at any moment, okay? So, Jill Bolte Taylor woke up one morning when she was 37 years old. She's a neuroanatomist at Harvard, and had a massive stroke, hemorrhagic stroke, that wiped out the left part of her brain. So she only had the right hemisphere left. This is one of my kicks that I'm on, this hemispheric stuff with brains. What happens when you have a hemorrhagic stroke, the brain tissue is, there may be some doctors in here, and if I'm wrong about this, don't tell me. I got to keep telling this lie wherever I go. But the brain tissue reacts to blood. It feels like a poison to it, so it begins to withdraw. It's worse. It's not as bad as the stroke where the blood stops flowing. This is just too much blood. So at any rate, it's wiped out. And she begins to see, over a 9-year period, her left hemisphere comes back online, 9 years. But because she's a neuroanatomist and studies this, she was the subject. She watched herself as she came back online. Well, how am I thinking now that I only have the right hemisphere? And then as I get more and more, what's changing about me? She's written 2 books on it. Maybe I should go back. So the left hemisphere processes information linearly and in sequence. Okay, she says, we'll see in detail how our left brain emotional module is designed to bring in information about the present moment and to compare that to any emotional experiences we have had in the past. Information comes into your head, goes through the amygdala to the hippocampus. The hippocampus shoots it out to both sides. The left hemisphere puts it in this linear thing. What's this like? And then the right hemisphere will look at the exact same, and the first question being asked is, am I safe? Okay? The left hemisphere is in charge of that. If you're walking down a path and you look down and there's a stick and that stick moves, your left hemisphere says, get out of here. It's no longer a stick. The right hemisphere says, I wonder what that is. We ought to play with it. Okay? So the left hemisphere will win in that argument, and it should. That's the way we operate. But it's also a confining place. The English language definition of rule is a left hemispheric definition of rule. The Genesis one is a right hemispheric definition that we talked about earlier. We'll keep going. The right hemisphere asks, I am safe. It ships it out. If the answer seems to be no, then I may have had it backwards. Full flight freeze sequence hijacks the neocortex, and we respond without thinking. So safety has 2 components, both related to familiarity. Do we feel safe with our sensory stimuli because it's consistent with what we're doing? And then we calculate whether we are safe when our experience remains consistent over time. So if you go into a place where you found yourself to be safe over and over and over again, you now can move out of that. It's no longer a problem for you. But if you're being attacked, or criticism is the coin of the realm there. I had a friend who was one of the top 5 guys at GE when Jack Welch was there. You know, back in you remember when Jack Welch was the king of all management. It was the worst place to work. All 5 of these guys that were regularly there working with him said he screamed at them all day long, all kinds of other stuff. Outside, he had this little different view. They all went off to run other companies. Recently, Boeing. One went down to Home Depot. He got canned in 25 minutes, I think. And they've all been, with one exception, no good at it because Welch had taught them the wrong way to handle people. He had rule in the English sense, not in the Hebrew sense. Safety means that I am protected by a culture that values me. I'm allowed to make mistakes, voice my opinion, honor people whose views are different than mine. Buckingham says these are the safety questions. Do I know what is expected of me? Do I have what I need to get the work done? Do I have a best friend at work? Those are the 12 questions. And if you answer all those yes, you're going to have an unbelievable workforce. So these are the core concepts about Genesis. We have power, but we have to exercise it as ambassadors from God. All right, so this is the world. This is where we want to go. I'm going fast here. I define a weaver as a person who works with others to create an environment that leads to flourishing, both organizationally and individually. Now, if you want to spend some time on flourishing, you can read Aristotle. The word in Greek is eudaimonia, and it is essentially the word that gets translated into English as happiness. So when the founding fathers of this country said you have the right to pursue happiness, it doesn't mean the government's job is to make you feel good. It is to present an environment in which you can flourish, which your talents can be used for a meaningful purpose. That's what that means. So here's another video.
Let me give you a thought experiment. Have you been to Washington? Have you seen the memorials? Absolutely fascinating. There's the Lincoln Memorial. Gettysburg Address on one side, second inaugural on the other. You go to the Jefferson Memorial, screeds of text. Martin Luther King Memorial, more than a dozen quotes from his speeches. I didn't realize in America you read memorials. Now go to the equivalent in London in Parliament Square and you will see that the monument to David Lloyd George contains 3 words. David Lloyd George. Nelson Mandela gets 2, Churchill gets just 1, Churchill. Why the difference? I'll tell you why the difference, because America was from the outset a nation of wave after wave of immigrants, so it had to create an identity, which it did by telling a story which you learned at school, you read on memorials, and you heard repeated in presidential inaugural addresses. Britain, until recently, wasn't a nation of immigrants, so it could take identity for granted. The trouble is now, the 2 things have happened, which shouldn't have happened together. The first thing is, in the West, we've stopped telling the story of who we are and why, even in America. And at the same time, immigration is higher than it's ever been before. So when you tell the story and your identity is strong, you can welcome the stranger. But when you stop telling the story, your identity gets weak and you feel threatened by the stranger. And that's bad. I tell you, Jews have been scattered and dispersed and exiled for 2,000 years. We never lost our identity. Why? Because at least once a year on the festival of Passover, we told our story and we taught it to our children and we ate the unleavened bread of affliction and tasted the bitter herbs of slavery. So we never lost our identity. I think collectively we've got to get back to telling our story, who we are, where we came from, what ideals by which we live. And if that happens, we will become strong enough to welcome the stranger and say, come and share our lives, share our stories, share our aspirations and dreams. That is the us of identity.
So this is Jonathan Sacks, the chief rabbi of England, and also a member of the House of Lords. And he's now deceased. This is a terrific talk. You're going to see, if we make it, we're going to see one more piece of this. But what he's really talking about, the reason this is up here is not for the immigrant question. It's the question about story. Okay? How do we live with the story? And the part of that I love is the Jewish part about at Passover every year we get together and we repeat the story. So it never gets lost from one generation to the next. You have to have a story. If your company doesn't have a story, you don't have a life. Literally. People will work, but they don't know why. And there's a darn good reason. I've been looking at it pretty hard for some time now. Jesus always taught with 3 different things about the same subject. He'd give you a rule, he'd tell you a story, we call them a parable, and then he generally did a miracle that showed how the parable and the rule worked. And it's 3 different learning styles, but if you watched him, he kept making the point over and over again in ways that don't seem to me to be connected by most of the people who are thinking about it. I don't know how to do this in the 5 minutes we have left. In the 6 minutes I have left. So this is the power of story. We just talked about it. Look, here's our meta story. If you're not in the, we have a religious meta story, but there is a cultural meta story in the West. And it is started by Descartes, who, we can't go through all this. Not a bad guy, I suppose, but we end up with, he got the Descartes in front of the horse, I think, but just wanted to see if you were awake. So look, he's trying to figure out whether or not he is alive or not. And he comes up with this thing. He's sitting in an oven, and he says, you know what it is, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. So that because I can think, that must mean I'm a real thing, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to think. Well, the oven wasn't saying anything. That should have been the first clue. He literally was sitting in an oven. He wanted to be shut out as he thought about this. So, Popeye turns it into, I am what I am. Come on, some of you are old enough to remember Popeye. All right? So this leads to all sorts of mischief. Reason becomes the preeminent thing. I mean, Descartes really did this to us. And it started us down a path of left hemispheric thinking, we're going to get to if we get to it fast enough, and a duality, okay? There is mind and body, liberal, conservative. We divide everything into two big groups. That's all Descartes from the 1600s. And then this guy shows up, Newton, who literally was spending his life trying to turn lead into gold, and he was teaching, I think, at Oxford, and the dean came to him and said, you're not doing much academically, so in 1 year he comes up with all of this Newtonian physics that we have, and then he went off and said, well, I got time left, I'll invent calculus. Okay, not a normal guy. All right? But Newton begins this whole idea, which fits neatly in with Descartes, about cause and effect. And when you do that, you move too far towards order. If everything is cause and effect, you move to order. So these implications are the metaphor, and I'm going to have to just fly through this stuff, but our metaphor is mechanical. Think of all the ways we say that. This company is a well-oiled, yeah, right? So the hierarchical organizational thing is mechanical. This one answers to this one. It's a series of gears. So how are we going to do this? So what the implications are, contrary to Genesis, that the universe is not a living organism, but this system that operates by total cause and effect. Now, I know you think, well, I don't know that I think that way, but just think about it. When you walk out of here and spend the rest of the day, how much of your life depends on cause and effect, and how that ends up, and it's very important, by the way. If you keep driving while the car in front of you stops, there is a definite cause and effect. But it's not how we ought to be thinking about everything. So, anyway, we got to go fast. Sorry. Cause leads to an inevitable, linear, and therefore predictable effect, and people are merely parts of the machine, which makes them dehumanized, right? If you're the ruler, you stand over a machine. The ruler's not in the machine, by the way. You don't ever put yourself in the machine if you're the running it. But we got to hurry. So the kind of environments we talked about earlier, all of this works great in a kind environment. It works terribly in a complex environment. And God knew that what God created was a complex environment, which is why he put people in it who were said, emulate me. And I can't tell you, because you'll never be able to learn it all, how I will do it in every circumstance, so you have to build a relationship with me. I was a very successful governor's chief of staff because I had known the governor so much and so well that I could predict with 99.9% accuracy what he was thinking. But he never told me that. It was all relational. And you have to spend time in it. It's what prayer and all the rest of it about. How do you build the relationship with God so that you can carry his authority in the world in a place where there is no way to line it up and make it perfectly go? And the answer is you just got to keep working at it. And by the way, you get to make terrible mistakes along the way. So, we got to skip through these, but you can see there's a bunch of different ways to draw this up. But all of the things that we want to do, rational versus emotional, you build something that's marketable. We're going to get to that a tiny bit if we get there. Transactional versus relational. If you in between the two, you're trustworthy. Closed mindset, open mindset. Read Carol Dweck's book, and you'll figure out what that's all about. So grit is the thing that works. So the hope for tomorrow to me is living between this, relationships founded on the Genesis 1 stewardship model, which is a story about the world as it was intended to be. All right, we got to go. Wow. Okay, there's only one thing to do, and that's punt. So you can have some time for questions. Let me get moving here. Quantum physics, if you want to read something fascinating, this guy, Carlo Rovelli, atheist, I told you about him, basically says that what we're learning in quantum physics is everything is relational, nothing is transactional, electrons don't stay in orbits, and you can't really see an electron except how it relates to something else. You have to have two electrons in order to know one is there. It's all relational. How do you remain an atheist in the middle of that? I don't know. I read something the other day I thought was hysterical. The people who don't like us say, you know, how can you believe that a person was born by virgin birth? And the proper retort is, how can you believe the universe was born by virgin birth? All right, we'll get through with Carlo here. Sorry. I want you to see two more videos. Ecosystem, if you don't like what I've been talking about, an ecosystem, how it works. Nobody knows, but everything fits together. That's why that picture's there. Ants, this is the way we think they go. Here's what ants do. There's always ants that are running off in the wrong direction. When they come into your house this spring, watch them. I did last year. There's always a bunch walking in a line, but some of them are wandering. Do you know what the wanderers are doing? The wanderers are there because everybody in the line knows that we're going to run out. We're going to food, but it's not going to be there forever. The wanderer's job is to go out and find new food in case when we run out of this. They're the most important ants in the ant colony. All right. You'll never get through this. Go on. These were good, though. This is, I want to tell you what the right hemisphere did for her. The right hemisphere is nonlinear. It draws together seemingly unrelated experiences and ideas to create new combinations and directions. It sees changes all around us that are unseen by the left hemisphere. Connections between things that don't go together are all in your right hemisphere. You need to figure out ways to encourage that. It's art, it's music, it's all the stuff that's not what we normally hang out with. She says, when she only had a right hemisphere, time went away, ego went away. She felt like she was part of the universe, totally fluid. And it was only when the left hemisphere came back online that she worried about advancing her career and all of that stuff. So anyway, sorry we're having to go so fast. Ah, boy. I can't. I don't have time. I'll stick around and show this. No, because this is terrific. This is the best football coach in football. I'm from Kansas City, so I'm biased. But, you know, there's pretty good proof of that until a couple weeks ago. But he says he's never had a meeting with his team longer than 5 minutes. He said, my job is to make every player a coach of every other player. I don't need to yell at them. They yell at themselves. I don't need to teach them. They teach each other. Every person on this team is here because they have character. That's why they got rid of Tyreek Hill. And they are people who are going to teach each other and be responsible to each other. So here's how this works out. Okay.
Anything he's ever
You're just going to have to be late to work.
tried to connect from in his career. Something. Chris Jones just shakes his head, can't believe it.
13 seconds left into the game. They're down 3.
To this point, here's Hill.
They're going to have a chance.
And they call timeout in a game last year to win it now.
Tony Romo thinks Kelsey's going across the middle. So does that guy.
Long-range Hail Mary kicks.
Got to throw it right away, right now to someone in the middle.
Down the middle.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, they're going to win the game. Or tie the game and then win it in overtime. All right? Now I'm going to show you. Kelsey and Mahomes are both mic'd up.
Very unfortunate for this Chiefs team. They've battled this entire game. Heck of a job. And now you're in a situation where you're behind the 8 ball, 13 seconds, as you mentioned.
Now here's the first play.
They throw it to Tyreek Hill. Timeout called by the Chiefs. It used 6 seconds.
They're playing like that. That seam is open.
All right, now they're communicating. If they put the same defense on, I'm going to run something we don't have in the playbook. The seam is open. And then you're going to listen to Mahomes now in this next, here we go, clip. He's saying, do it, Kels, do it. The play that's called by Andy Reid is not that play. The play that's called by Andy Reid doesn't work. Those two guys are given enough responsibility on this team to make the decision whether or not Andy Reid likes it. They see the situation in this complex environment, they make an adjustment, and that's what happens. So I love this. I'm not going to get to the Jonathan Sachs thing. Steve Jobs had this done right before he died. And here it is. What's in there? It's totally nonlinear. How does it make somebody feel? There's love in there. And we're not going to do anything that doesn't enhance people's lives. Now, you may disagree whether it enhanced it or hurt it, and I'm pretty much moving to the hurt thing, all these dang phones, but it's unbelievable what happens when a company has that story and it's not linear. You put together things that no one has ever put together. It's exactly what it means to rule. It's exactly what it means to bear the image of God. And even though Stephen Jobs was a Buddhist, this is what it means to create, to do what we were put here to do, to weave together the people that we get to spend our lives with, to build relationships and forget transactions. And if you really want to change even the tiniest little bit of the world in which you live, that's how you do it. What a treat to be in Houston. Thank you all.